Welcome. Before we dive into this shocking story, tell me where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because a lot of work went into uncovering the true events behind this bizarre, unexplainable mystery. This isn't just a story of a boy surviving against all odds. It's a tale that left doctors, neighbors, and history itself baffled, and his blue eyes became a symbol of a mystery that defied logic. The birth of the black boy with blue eyes in 1877 was immediately met with astonishment and disbelief by everyone who witnessed it. In a small, rural community, still recovering from the aftermath of the Civil War and Reconstruction, the birth of a child was usually a quiet, humble affair, a moment of joy, but one that rarely drew attention beyond the family. Yet this child was different from the very beginning. His eyes, a piercing shade of blue, contrasted sharply with his dark skin, an anomaly that left midwives and family alike frozen in shock. They had never seen anything like it, and the infant's unusual appearance became the first sign that his life would be anything but ordinary. The mother, an enslaved woman's descendant who had grown up in hardship and poverty, gave birth under difficult conditions. There were complications during labor, and by all accounts, the baby should not have survived the ordeal. The midwife attending the birth immediately noted that the child was weak, nearly lifeless, and struggled to breathe. Yet, as she cleaned him and tried to stimulate his tiny lungs, the infant's blue eyes flickered open, wide and alert, and he let out a sharp, piercing cry that seemed to carry through the small cabin. It was a cry that did not sound like that of a frail, dying baby, but instead held a strange vitality, as if the child was asserting his presence in a world that had nearly denied him life. Word of the boy's birth quickly spread through the surrounding community, fueled by the unusual combination of his skin and eye color. In 19th century America, such a physical trait was often met with a mixture of fear, fascination, and superstition. Neighbors whispered that this child was a sign of something greater, though whether that was good or ill no one could say. Some elders murmured that blue eyes on a black child were unnatural, warning that it might signal a life touched by forces beyond human understanding. Others simply marveled at the sheer rarity of the occurrence, seeing in him a living miracle that defied conventional biology and reason. From the very start, the boy's life was intertwined with inexplicable events. Within hours of birth, those who touched him reported an unusual warmth in his tiny hands, a pulsing vitality that seemed far beyond what should have been possible for a newborn in such frail condition. The mother, exhausted from labor and caring for him with minimal assistance, noticed that despite his weakness at birth, he seemed to respond to her voice and touch in an almost preternatural way. He would follow her movements with his gaze, his tiny fingers gripping her hand with a strength that belied his size. Even the midwife, a woman well versed in the hardships of rural childbirth, remarked that she had never seen a baby so resilient in the face of life-threatening complications. Community members who visited to see the child often described a sense of unease mixed with wonder. The baby's blue eyes, unnaturally intense, seemed to look beyond the room, beyond the people, and into something distant and unknowable. Those who held him swore they felt an almost electric presence, a subtle energy that made their hearts race and their minds feel heavy with questions they could not answer. The infant's first days were marked by both fascination and fear. People were drawn to him, yet could not fully explain why. Doctors and midwives, though limited in medical knowledge by modern standards, were baffled. This baby, born in conditions that would have claimed countless others, not only survived but displayed remarkable vitality. His cries were strong, his heartbeat steady, and within days he was feeding, growing, and even laughing in fleeting moments. Experts who came to examine him left scratching their heads, unable to reconcile what they observed with the scientific understanding of the time. The child had entered the world in a state that should have been fatal. Yet he was alive, and he seemed to carry a presence that could not be measured by stethoscopes or charts. From the moment of his birth, the black boy with blue eyes became a symbol of the unexplainable. His very existence challenged the understanding of biology, of fate, and of life itself. The people around him knew that they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would mark not just his life, but the lives of all who came into contact with him. Even as a newborn, he seemed to command attention, respect, and a cautious reverence. The whispers began immediately. This was a child who should not have lived. Yet here he was, alive and alert, carrying the weight of mystery in his blue eyes. In those first days, every cry, every movement, every glance of those piercing eyes became a story to recount and a riddle to ponder. The child had entered the world not quietly, not as one among many, but as a singular anomaly, a living enigma that would haunt and intrigue the community for years to come. And so, the story of the black boy with blue eyes, born in 1877 under circumstances that defied both science and expectation, began a story of survival mystery, and a life destined to challenge every law that the people of his time thought they understood. From the very first days of his life, the black boy with blue eyes showed signs of resilience and vitality that baffled everyone who encountered him. Unlike most infants born in 1877, especially in rural Alabama, where medical care was scarce, he seemed to defy the fragility typically associated with newborns. Those present at his birth had already witnessed something extraordinary. He had survived a complicated labor that should have claimed his life. Yet as he settled into the first few days of existence, his continued survival seemed even more improbable, bordering on the miraculous. He drank vigorously, his tiny body gaining strength rapidly, and even the midwives who had seen countless births admitted they had never witnessed anything like it. It wasn't just his physical health that puzzled observers. The baby exhibited behaviors that seemed almost aware for his age. When held by his mother, he would turn his head deliberately toward her voice, following the tones and inflections with unwavering focus. He responded to gentle touches with a firmness that belied his size, gripping fingers with astonishing strength. Neighbors and family members noted that he would sometimes lie quietly for hours, staring into space with those startling blue eyes, as if he were observing something beyond their comprehension. The intensity of his gaze created a strange atmosphere, leaving adults uneasy, as if the infant's awareness extended beyond ordinary perception. Doctors and midwives, who were called to examine him, were left questioning their understanding of infant health. According to their notes, the boy's vital signs were exceptional. His heartbeat was steady, his respiration strong, and his reflexes unusually sharp for a newborn. Normally, babies born in that era, especially those who experienced birth complications, were prone to infections, fevers, and weakness. Yet he seemed impervious to these typical dangers. When small cuts or scrapes appeared, they healed rapidly. When he cried, the sound was powerful and commanding, filling the small cabin as though announcing his survival to the world. Such vigor in a baby, particularly one born under life-threatening circumstances, challenged everything the attending medical professionals thought they knew about newborn development. The community around him quickly took notice. Neighbors and distant relatives came to witness the child, drawn by the unusual tales of his birth and early resilience. Some were in awe, convinced they were in the presence of a miracle. Others were uneasy, whispering that the boy's survival was unnatural, perhaps even a sign of a mysterious or divine force at work. Even the family members, though proud and protective, could not shake the unease that accompanied each extraordinary display of vitality. His mere presence seemed to command attention, creating a mixture of fascination and apprehension among all who encountered him. As the weeks passed, the boy continued to defy expectations. Illnesses that frequently afflicted newborns, fevers, colic, and infections, appeared to bypass him entirely. When other children in the community fell sick, he remained perfectly healthy, his bright blue eyes observing the world with a calm intensity. The pattern of his resilience became more pronounced with time, reinforcing the idea that his survival was not merely a matter of luck. There was something unique about this child, some force of nature that seemed to protect and sustain him against the odds. Even the boy's behavior added to the mystery. He displayed a level of alertness unusual for a child of his age, reacting to voices and movements with almost deliberate precision. When strangers entered the cabin, he would watch them intently, his eyes fixed upon them with what some described as an unnerving awareness. He seemed to anticipate events, turning his head toward footsteps before anyone reached the door, or crying moments before a household accident occurred. While some dismissed these observations as coincidence, the consistency and frequency of such occurrences created a growing sense of unease and wonder among the adults around him. The boy's unusual resilience and perceptive nature quickly became central to the community's stories. Families spoke of him with reverence and trepidation, often framing him as a child touched by fate. Each passing day seemed to reinforce the belief that he was extraordinary, that the world had not seen a child like him before and might never see one again. Parents warned their own children to respect him. Neighbors made pilgrimages to catch a glimpse, and even the local clergy debated whether his survival was a blessing, a miracle, or something more enigmatic. By the end of his first month, it was clear to all who observed him that this child's life would not be ordinary. His continued survival, despite the frailty of infancy and the hardships of his environment, made him a living mystery. Every cry, every movement, and every gaze seemed charged with meaning, leaving adults questioning not just the science of life, but the nature of existence itself. The boy had not merely survived, he had thrived under conditions that would have claimed countless others. And in doing so, he had captured the attention and imagination of everyone around him. This early display of extraordinary vitality was the foundation for the legend that would follow him throughout his life. From his very first days, the black boy with blue eyes was more than a child. He was a puzzle, a defiance of natural laws, and a living embodiment of the inexplicable. His survival, remarkable and unsettling, set the stage for the events that would continue to baffle doctors, neighbors, and eventually history itself. making him a symbol of resilience, mystery, and the unexplainable forces that sometimes touch the world in subtle yet profound ways. From the very beginning, the black boy with blue eyes was surrounded by events that seemed impossible to explain, while his resilience and unusual vitality drew awe. It was his cries that began to terrify those around him. From the first week of his life, the sound of his wailing appeared to coincide with strange and often tragic events. The cries were not like those of an ordinary infant. They were deep, resonant, and strangely commanding, carrying an almost unnatural weight that seemed to ripple through the small cabin and the surrounding community. Those who heard him would later describe a shiver that ran through their bodies, a sensation that made them instinctively uneasy, as if the sound carried knowledge of events yet to come. The first incident occurred when a neighbor, visiting to witness the miraculous child, lost consciousness suddenly while holding the infant. No one could explain it medically. The neighbor awoke hours later, unharmed but pale and shaken, and from that point on, the connection between the boy's cries and unexpected misfortune became a persistent concern. Shortly afterward, a distant relative fell gravely ill the same day. The boy cried inconsolably for hours. The timing was so precise, and the correlation so striking that whispers began to circulate among the family and the wider community. This child was somehow tied to life and death in ways no one could understand. Neighbors who came to see the child reported that whenever he cried, an unsettling stillness seemed to descend on the environment. Birds would fall silent, dogs would retreat to the edges of yards, and even the wind seemed to pause. In some cases, members of households where he had been visiting experienced sudden accidents, unexpected injuries, or bouts of illness shortly afterward. The phenomenon was documented with growing regularity by those who were willing to note such occurrences, though skepticism ran high. Many attempted to rationalize these events as coincidence, a series of unfortunate circumstances magnified by fear and superstition. But the repeated alignment with the boy's cries made disbelief difficult. The mother, who had been protective and attentive from the moment of his birth, was deeply unsettled by the correlation. She attempted to soothe him at all hours, trying to ensure that no one else was present when he cried. Yet, despite her best efforts, the boy's cries continued to carry a tangible and inexplicable effect. When neighbors or relatives were present, these sounds seemed to resonate with an intensity that affected more than just the immediate room. They seemed to linger, echoing through walls and fields alike, leaving behind a palpable unease. Local physicians and midwives, though initially skeptical, could not ignore the pattern. They began recording dates and times of the child's crying alongside incidents of sickness, sudden accidents, and other misfortunes in nearby households. Though lacking scientific tools to provide a definitive explanation, the consistency was undeniable. Each recorded incident added to the growing legend of the boy. He was no ordinary child, and his cries seemed to carry a power that defied contemporary understanding of medicine and nature. The community's reaction was mixed, blending awe, fear, and superstition. Some believed the boy's cries were a form of divine intervention, a reminder of higher powers at work, whether for blessing or judgment. Others whispered darker theories, claiming that the child carried an unknown curse, or that he had been marked by forces beyond human comprehension. Even among those who had once admired his miraculous survival, a sense of dread began to overshadow wonder. Parents cautioned their children to avoid him. Elders debated how best to manage his presence, and visitors were increasingly hesitant to approach the family home. As time passed, the boy's cries were associated with increasingly severe incidents. Livestock fell ill or died, small household fires occurred, and neighbors reported accidents that defied simple explanation. While no one could claim the child intentionally caused these events, the correlation was enough to establish a pattern of fear. The cries were no longer mere expressions of need or discomfort. They had become a signal, a mysterious, almost prophetic marker of misfortune that seemed to follow anyone nearby. Despite the fear, there were those who approached the situation with curiosity rather than superstition. Scholars, visiting physicians, and even local clergy attempted to investigate, documenting the timing of his cries and the subsequent occurrences. Their conclusions were inconclusive, often emphasizing the improbability of a direct causal relationship, but admitting that the coincidences were difficult to dismiss. The boy, in effect, had become a living anomaly, a mystery that challenged not only the rational understanding of his community, but the broader assumptions about life, health, and chance. The cries also began to shape the boy's own identity, at least in the eyes of those around him. He was treated with a mixture of reverence and caution. People avoided holding him for extended periods, fearing the mysterious consequences. He became the center of whispered stories, a figure whose presence demanded attention but also elicited fear. Over time, his cries became more than mere infantile sounds. They became a symbol of the inexplicable power he seemed to wield over life and death in subtle, mysterious ways. By the end of his first year, the boy's cries had firmly established him as a figure both miraculous and terrifying. They were the earliest indication of a life that would remain a puzzle to all who encountered him. Those who witnessed the connection between his wails and the surrounding misfortunes would carry the story forward, ensuring that the legend of the black boy with blue eyes, the child who defied death and whose cry marked every misfortune, would endure for generations. Each cry, each unexplained incident, became a thread in the tapestry of his life, a tapestry woven with mystery, fear, and awe that no observer of the time could fully understand or explain. The reactions of the family, neighbors, and local community to the black boy with blue eyes were a complex mixture of awe, fear, and fascination, and they began almost immediately after his birth. From the moment people laid eyes on him, it was clear that he was unlike any child they had ever seen. His striking blue eyes, so unusual against his dark skin, were the first thing that caught the attention of everyone who visited. Some gazed upon him in wonder, convinced that they were witnessing a miracle, a child born under impossible circumstances who had already survived the threats of a difficult birth. Others, however, looked upon him with unease, whispering in private that his appearance was unnatural and perhaps even an omen. These contrasting reactions set the tone for how the boy would be perceived throughout his life. Within the family, there was a mixture of pride and anxiety. The mother, who had endured a perilous labor to bring him into the world, saw his survival as both a blessing and a burden. She marveled at his unusual vitality and the intelligence that seemed to radiate from his gaze. But she also feared the strange occurrences that seemed to follow him. Every time the boy cried, there seemed to be a ripple of misfortune, or unease around the household. Family members who came to visit sometimes experienced sudden illnesses or minor accidents, and over time, a sense of caution developed. While they loved the boy and nurtured him as best they could, there was an unspoken awareness that his presence brought something inexplicable, a force neither fully benevolent nor entirely malevolent, but profoundly unusual. Neighbors were drawn to the story quickly, spreading tales of the child's miraculous survival and uncanny behavior. Some came out of curiosity, hoping to witness the blue-eyed boy for themselves. These visits were often met with mixed emotions. On one hand, people were fascinated by his resilience and the stories surrounding him, treating him as a living marvel. On the other hand, fear often accompanied their fascination. The reports of the boy's cries coinciding with sudden misfortunes in nearby households made many wary of approaching him too closely. Mothers would warn their children to keep their distance, and adults frequently exchanged hushed comments about the boy's strange presence and the possible meaning behind his unusual eyes and abilities. The wider community, already steeped in superstition and a belief in omens, interpreted the boy's existence in a variety of ways. Some saw him as a divine sign, a child touched by a higher power, meant to survive against all odds. They considered his blue eyes a mark of providence, a sign that he carried an extraordinary fate. Others, however, whispered that his very presence was unnatural, that he was cursed or connected to forces beyond human comprehension. This dual perception created a tense atmosphere around him. While he was celebrated by some as a symbol of resilience and miraculous survival, others avoided him, fearful that contact might bring misfortune. Local clergy also weighed in, trying to provide guidance to the anxious community. Some ministers preached that the boy was a sign of God's power, encouraging the faithful to regard him as a living testament to divine will. Others cautioned that his unusual birth and the unexplained events that followed could indicate something more ominous, urging families to remain vigilant and prayerful. The combination of religious interpretation and local superstition only amplified the mystique surrounding the child, cementing his status as someone extraordinary and unexplainable. In some cases, the boy's interactions with neighbors and other children produced reactions that were difficult to categorize. When he cried, for example, nearby children often became uneasy or frightened, and some even fell ill without clear medical explanation. Adults interpreted these responses as evidence of the boy's mysterious influence, a tangible connection between him and events that seemed to defy ordinary understanding. These incidents reinforced both the reverence and fear with which he was regarded, and they contributed to a growing narrative that the child was not simply remarkable, but somehow connected to forces beyond their comprehension. Family and neighbors alike struggled to balance love and care for the boy with caution and fear. The child became a central figure in the community's collective consciousness, a living symbol of the inexplicable. His survival against the odds, combined with his unusual features and the strange events associated with him, ensured that he could not be treated like any ordinary child. Every action, every cry, and every glance from his piercing blue eyes seemed to carry weight, leaving those around him simultaneously amazed and unsettled. Ultimately, the reactions of the family, neighbors, and community reflected the deep tension between admiration and apprehension. While they nurtured him, marveled at his vitality, and shared stories of his survival, they could not ignore the strange phenomena that seemed to follow his presence. He was a living mystery, challenging both their understanding of life and the limits of reason. The mixture of love, fear, and fascination that surrounded him from birth laid the foundation for a legend that would endure, and it shaped how the boy was perceived and treated throughout his early life, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who encountered him. By the end of his early years, it was clear that the black boy with blue eyes had become more than a child. He had become a symbol of resilience, of mystery, and of forces that neither science nor superstition could fully explain. His impact on his family and community was profound, and the reactions he elicited from those around him would set the stage for the further strange and unexplainable events that would define his life. Attempts by physicians and experts to explain the unexplainable nature of the black boy with blue eyes quickly became a source of both frustration and fascination. In 1877, medical knowledge in rural Alabama was limited, and physicians relied largely on observation, anecdotal evidence, and the rudimentary understanding of biology available at the time. Yet even within these constraints, the boy's condition defied every expectation. Doctors who came to examine him were initially skeptical, believing that his survival after a complicated birth could be attributed to simple luck or the resilience inherent in some newborns. However, as they observed him over days and weeks, it became increasingly clear that his vitality and unusual characteristics could not be easily explained. One of the first things the physicians noticed was the child's remarkable physical development. Unlike most infants born under difficult circumstances, he showed extraordinary strength in his limbs and an unusual alertness for his age. His reflexes were fast and precise, his grip unusually firm, and he seemed to respond to stimuli in ways that went far beyond what was considered normal for a newborn. Doctors attempted to monitor his growth, weight gain, and overall health, but no standard metric could account for the child's exceptional resilience. Every measurement and observation suggested that he was thriving against all odds, a living anomaly in a time when infant mortality rates were high and medical interventions were limited. The boy's blue eyes, so striking against his dark skin, became a particular focus for speculation. Physicians debated the possibility of genetic anomalies, cross-ancestry traits, or rare pigmentation conditions, yet no clear explanation could account for the depth and intensity of their color. They took blood samples when possible, examined his organs and physical responses, and compared him to medical records of other newborns, but none of these efforts provided clarity. Some suggested that his eye color might be symbolic or even a harbinger, reflecting the tendency of communities at the time to imbue unusual physical traits with spiritual or mystical significance. Whether they saw it as a curiosity or a sign, the boy's eyes contributed to the sense that he existed at the edge of scientific understanding. Beyond physical traits, doctors were confronted with the boy's inexplicable connection to events in his surroundings. His cries, as previously noted, seemed to coincide with misfortunes or sudden illnesses affecting others nearby. Physicians attempted to document these occurrences with careful notes, seeking patterns that could be explained through environmental or psychosomatic means. Yet the alignment of these events with his behavior was so precise that rational explanations faltered. They pondered the possibility of coincidence, collective hysteria, or confirmation bias, but the consistency of reports challenged every conventional assumption. Some doctors, faced with such phenomena, became reluctant to visit the child for fear of becoming entangled in the mystery themselves. Attempts to explain the boy's survival were also complicated by social and cultural factors. Physicians had to navigate the local community's mixture of fear, superstition, and reverence. Families often emphasized the miraculous nature of his health, while neighbors whispered about curses or divine intervention. Doctors could neither ignore the community's beliefs nor fully convince them of natural explanations. This intersection of medical observation and cultural interpretation created a tension that further complicated scientific inquiry. The child's health and unusual traits became a subject of fascination, not just for medicine, but for anyone interested in the boundaries of what was considered possible. Some physicians even tried to enlist the help of colleagues from larger towns and cities, writing letters describing the boy and requesting advice or theories. These correspondences reveal the depth of their perplexity. Specialists from distant areas suggested a variety of possibilities, ranging from rare genetic mutations to congenital anomalies that might account for his blue eyes or exceptional resilience. Still, none could explain the combination of traits and the reported link between his cries and misfortunes, leaving the boy as an enduring puzzle. Despite the inability to find a definitive explanation, medical attempts to study the boy were not without consequence. The meticulous documentation of his growth, health, and behaviors created a body of observations that would later become part of the legend surrounding him. Even though science could not provide answers, these records confirmed that something extraordinary had occurred. A child who should not have survived not only lived, but exhibited abilities and characteristics that consistently defied conventional understanding. Ultimately, the efforts of physicians and experts highlighted the limits of scientific knowledge in the face of extraordinary phenomena. The black boy with blue eyes became a case study not only in resilience and survival, but also in the tension between observation, explanation, and the inexplicable. Every attempt to analyze, measure, or rationalize his life revealed the profound gap between what was understood and what could be experienced firsthand. In trying to explain him, experts inadvertently deepened the mystery, leaving the child as both a subject of study and a living anomaly that defied all expectations of 19th-century medicine. These efforts to comprehend the unexplainable reinforced the community's awe and trepidation. The boy was not just a surviving infant. He was a symbol of life, pushing against limits, a living testament to the boundaries of human knowledge, and a reminder that some mysteries cannot be contained by charts, tests, or conventional reasoning. Even as physicians and experts documented and theorized, the boy remained fundamentally beyond their grasp, a living enigma whose very existence challenged the prevailing understanding of life, health, and the natural world. The lasting legacy and continued speculation surrounding the black boy with blue eyes became one of the most remarkable aspects of his story, extending far beyond his early years and touching generations who never even saw him. From the moment of his birth in 1877, the boy's life was enveloped in a cloud of mystery, resilience, and inexplicable phenomena, and these qualities cemented his place in local lore. People who encountered him, whether family members, neighbors, or traveling visitors, carried stories of his unusual appearance, his extraordinary survival, and the strange events associated with his cries. And these stories were passed down through families and communities as cautionary tales, legends, and occasionally as testimonies of wonder. Even after he grew beyond infancy, the boy continued to astonish those around him. Reports described him as unusually alert, perceptive, and physically strong for his age, displaying abilities and awareness that seemed beyond what any child of his environment could possess. He became a focal point for speculation, with people wondering how a child who had survived near-fatal birth complications could continue to thrive so vigorously. His piercing blue eyes remained a source of fascination and unease, considered by some as a symbol of uniqueness, and by others as an omen of otherworldly significance. These characteristics ensured that even decades later, people still spoke of him as someone extraordinary, someone whose existence challenged the boundaries of natural law and human understanding. As time passed, the stories surrounding him became layered with folklore. Some told of his ability to anticipate danger, almost as if he could sense events before they happened. Others recounted how his presence seemed to affect those around him. Animals behaved differently, crops thrived or failed unpredictably, and even the weather seemed to shift in subtle, unexplained ways when he was nearby. While skeptics often dismissed these accounts as exaggerations or coincidences, the consistency and frequency of such tales reinforced the idea that the boy was more than just a remarkable child. He was a living symbol of the inexplicable. In the wider historical context, his story serves as a reflection of the fears, hopes, and beliefs of the era. Born into a post-Reconstruction South, where medical knowledge was limited and superstition was widespread, the boy's survival became a focal point for local imagination. Communities struggled to reconcile what they observed with what they understood, and the boy became a lens through which people examined their own beliefs about life, death, and the limits of human endurance. His continued survival and the mysterious events associated with him inspired debates among local elders, visiting physicians, and clergy, highlighting the tension between science, religion, and folklore in the 19th century South. Even generations later, the boy's story persisted in oral histories. Family members recounted tales of his early survival, the strange power of his cries, and the unusual characteristics that marked him as different. These stories were shared not just as entertainment, but as a way to preserve a sense of wonder and to reflect on the enduring mystery of life. Local historians and storytellers documented fragments of these accounts, ensuring that the legend of the black boy with blue eyes would not vanish with the passing of those who had witnessed it firsthand. The legacy of the boy also provoked philosophical reflection. Scholars and curious minds have pondered what his life says about human resilience and the mysteries of existence. Was his survival a product of rare genetics, environmental factors, or something beyond scientific explanation? Did his piercing blue eyes carry symbolic meaning, or were they merely an anomaly amplified by the dramatic narrative surrounding him? The continued speculation highlights a universal fascination with cases that defy conventional understanding, instances where life, chance, and perhaps fate intersect in ways that challenge perception. In the modern era, the story has become part of regional folklore, inspiring both intrigue and caution. Historians, paranormal enthusiasts, and storytellers alike examine the tale, using it to explore the boundaries of possibility. For those who hear the story today, it serves as a reminder that history is full of inexplicable events, and that human lives can carry mysteries that endure long after the individuals themselves have passed. The boy's life exemplifies the enduring tension between the known and the unknown, science and superstition, reality and legend. Ultimately, the lasting legacy of the black boy with blue eyes lies not just in the specific events of his early life, but in the way his story has been remembered and retold. He became more than a child. He became a symbol of survival against impossible odds, of the mysteries that life can present, and of the human fascination with the unexplained. Even today, his story resonates, inviting listeners to question what is truly possible, to wonder at the extraordinary, and to acknowledge that some mysteries, no matter how much time passes, refuse to be solved. The speculation, reverence, and awe that surrounded him during his life continue to echo through history, ensuring that the boy who defied death remains a figure of unending intrigue.